Welcome to episode 263 of the Simple Flying podcast and our 5th video adaptation. Here are the topics and pieces of news that Simple Flying managing editor Tom Boone and senior editor Channing Reid will be discussing today. Spirit Airlines furloughs and demotes pilots, Etihad's extraordinary challenge, American Airlines Airbus A319 cabin retrofits, Wizz Air cuts its Airbus A321XLR order, and finally, Hawaiian Airlines is adding premium economy cabin to A330s. So, if you're ready, let's get started.
A lot is happening at Spirit, and that is where we will begin today's podcast. Ultra low-cost carrier Spirit Airlines announced just on Monday of this week that they will furlough 270 pilots this fall as the airline is preparing for a smaller off-season schedule and really tries to find its financial footing. Now, this is reporting coming from CNBC as well as other outlets that have reported on this. The airline is planning to downgrade about 140 pilots from captain to first officer, and that's according to a note to aviators from the Airline Pilots Association, their union, and that downgrade will take effect on October 1st. This comes as the airline has really been going through a lot of changes, of course. We know that pretty much since the JetBlue Airways failed merger, the airline filed for bankruptcy, and they've really been trying to find their footing. And of course, one of the things that you have to do to stay afloat, unfortunately, is to downsize your workforce. So Ryan Muller, he's the captain and chairman of Spirit's, the Airline Pilots Association chapter. He said, quote, "We know how hard this news hits, and there's no dressing that up. Spirit continues to shrink, and with it, the value of pilot seniority and Spirit careers continues to erode. The furloughs take effect on November 1st, and the airline says it's to better, quote, to better align staffing for our flight schedule." Now, as I mentioned, Spirit, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, they emerged from that in March. They've been trying to win over customers with their more upscale travel options, which is something that we reported on. They completely changed up their fare bundles and how they classify those fares. And according to the airline, it's fared better than their bare bones coach tickets that the airline has been known for several years. The airline, in a statement, they said, quote, "We are taking necessary steps to ensure we operate as efficiently as possible as part of our efforts to return to profitability." It's really unfortunate to see this because, you know, you think about it, if there was the merger with JetBlue, would we be in the position? Would there be 270 pilots being furloughed and 140 being demoted? Who knows? But at the same time, we know that, there was a reason why that merger wasn't able to go through either. Rough times for Spirit, and you can only think about what's going through the minds of, the affected pilots.
Well, I mean, fingers crossed for them. Hopefully they land on their feet, however they end up going through this. I wanted to talk about one of the more exciting loyalty promotions in the industry right now, and that's Etihad Airways' Extraordinary Challenge. And this campaign is all about gamifying the airline's loyalty program and giving travelers a genuine reason to explore new destinations. And for one lucky member, there's the promise of a staggering prize, and that is 5 million Etihad guest miles. So why this big push? Well, over the last year, Etihad has launched 17 new destinations in just 12 months. That's a phenomenal feat for any carrier, and naturally they wanted to promote these new routes in a way that was both bold and engaging. So to discuss this, I recently caught up with Mark Potter, who's Etihad Airways' Director of Loyalty, and this is what he had to tell me. He said, "We needed something to be bold as a program that went out to market and talk about those destinations, but also allowed our members to be part of the journey. Given there was the depth of destinations across 4 different continents, and some of those markets probably were surprises to some people, we wanted to give members a reason to travel to them and enjoy them." So actually, there's been 2 variations of the Extraordinary Challenge, and the first version was pretty intense. Members had to complete all 15 destinations to get in the running for the top prize. But demand was overwhelming, and Etihad responded by making the challenge more accessible. Now, the first 100 members to reach 5 destinations will get 25,000 miles, and the first 100 who reach 10 destinations pick up 100,000 miles. This can be combined with the grand prize, so if you won the 5 million miles, you could actually get 5,125,000 miles. But as Potter puts it, for those members who don't have the ability to travel to all 15, we can still give them a reason to transact and hopefully engage in some of the new, exciting destinations we have. So the 5 and 10 milestone ticked the box on a broader group of rewards for our membership and also gave options to people that are outside the UAE and in the UAE but may not be able to travel to all 15. Now, of course, there has been some criticism, for example, Sochi in Russia being included as one of the destinations, even though it's currently off limits to many Western travelers. Both the UK and the US, of course, warn against all travel to Russia, given the current situation. Potter did acknowledge this, and he mentioned that it's actually become part of the challenge, saying, I think it was interesting because obviously the original crux of the campaign had all 15 in there. We debated in the past on various different locations and the ability to get there, but there was also a narrative that kind of plays into the extraordinary challenge in a way. It's the crux of the activity that when there's a will, there's a way. So this goes beyond just Etihad, because the trend of gamification in airline loyalty programs is definitely gaining momentum. We've seen status challenges pop up with SAS and Turkish Airlines recently, and in Turkish's case, the uptake has been so overwhelming that it had to close the challenge early. Potter sees this enthusiasm for competition and achievement sticking around, and he told us, the gamification element, I think, is here to stay. People like seeing badges or stamps on their passports, or the competition element where they can see the leaderboard. It drives excitement, it drives inspiration and aspiration to transact. So if you're interested in participating, Etihad's Extraordinary Challenge runs until May 25th, 2026. And to win that grand prize, you've got to be enrolled in Etihad Guest, sign up for the challenge, and then fly to a series of destinations, including Algiers, Atlanta, Chiang Mai, Hanoi, Hong Kong, Krabi, Medan, Peshawar, Phnom Penh, Taipei, Tunis, Addis Ababa, Sochi, Prague, and Warsaw. So whether you're a mileage collector, a competitive traveler, or just someone looking for an excuse to try somewhere new, this challenge from Etihad is worth a look. So there's 15 in the challenge, there's 17 in the space of 12 months overall.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible when you look at all that growth there and, how many destinations that they can offer. I'm going to talk about American Airlines. They are one step closer to removing all seatback screens across their narrow body aircraft. And Tom, this is something that we've reported on before, and it really does generate a pretty nice discussion on our stories and threads online, simpleflying.com. But the latest developments that we have here is that the Fort Worth, Texas-based airline has reportedly begun the initial phase of retrofitting the cabins of more than 30 legacy Airbus A319 aircraft. Earlier this month, American ferried a prototype aircraft to undergo the overhaul. Now, as I mentioned, this represents really the last of the narrow-body aircraft that have seatback screens being removed. They're going to be gone pretty much within the next couple of years. Now, while that retrofit does involve the removal of seatback screens, we do know that the first class cabin is going to be expanded along with the introduction of other new elements. So according to flight data, we have the aircraft, the tail number is November 8001 November, and that flew from Charlotte Douglas International Airport to El Salvador International Airport. That was on July 15th. Now, the aircraft will likely remain at the airport for the next couple of weeks so that crews can expand that first class cabin from 4 seats, from 8 seats to a total of 12 in first class. Now, what we don't know is if the main cabin will be downsized because of that. So we're looking at another row added to first class. It likely means that the main cabin will be downsized, but American hasn't confirmed that. I do know that Southwest Airlines, when they increased the seats on their 737-700s a few years ago, actually maybe like 10 years ago now, they just added another row and then they made the legroom a little bit smaller. So it just depends on what they're going to do. We do know that airlines really try to fit as many passengers as they can in the cabin, but some other new elements include extra large overhead bins and a new cabin design, which features power outlets installed at every seat. Now, the thing about American is they're really kind of going the opposite from its competitors, Delta Airlines and United Airlines, which have been focusing on either adding more seatback screens to their aircraft. So, United has the United Next program, which means they're adding seatback screens to every plane. And Delta, they've had seatback screens on pretty much all of their aircraft with the exception of the Boeing 717. And they have been focusing on adding more offerings to the seatback screen. So we have Delta Sync, which is a pretty amazing system that I got a chance to try a couple of times on a couple of flights. So American, though, they're saying, nope, we don't want any seatback screens on our narrow-body aircraft. We want to just go with, entertainment on your own device. The whole point of this really is to have decreased weight on board the aircraft, and it's definitely something that American has been running with for the last couple of years.
I wanted to dive into some pretty major news around Wizz Air's fleet planning and changes to its Middle Eastern strategy. And, we've seen big moves from Wizz Air recently, and the most significant is the airline's cutting back on its commitment to the Airbus A321XLR, and it's now planning to only take up to 15 of the aircraft instead of the original 47. Now, this dramatic shift comes as the airline's preparing to exit the Middle East and specifically Abu Dhabi, and this was a key driver behind the earlier order. But with no need for the XLR's extended range from Abu Dhabi, Wizz is reevaluating its needs. According to Wizz Air CEO Joseph Varadi, Wizz isn't actually cancelling its order with Airbus. Instead, the company's converting those 32 extra A321XLR orders. And he described the order emphasizing we're not talking about cancelling, but rather changing the bulk of the order book. So Varadi sees this as a potentially positive move for the airline, and he mentioned that accepting fewer A321XLRs could eliminate some complexities, especially when it comes to scheduling crews for long-haul routes, which is something that they say is adding an additional operational headache. The primary driver behind this decision, obviously, as we mentioned, is Wizz Air's withdrawal from Abu Dhabi. And the Abu Dhabi subsidiary is going to be shut down by just September 1st because of geopolitical instability and reliability concerns. But without Abu Dhabi, you just don't really need so much of the extra reach that the XLR was built with. And to put things into context, Wizz Air only received its first XLR 2 months ago at a ceremony in Hamburg. I was there for the delivery, as we mentioned on the podcast before. And as of now, there's 3 XLRs in the active fleet, but for what happens next, Varadi noted, we're in discussions with Airbus, so I cannot comment on the very terms and very timings of each of the aircraft, but I think fairly shortly we can come back with a firm, confirmed position. It's not just Wizz Air that's having these XLR turbulence, I'd say, with their plans, because, you were just talking about American Airlines, and it's interesting because I was reading on Simple Flying, of course, that American Airlines has taken possession of its first XLR, but it won't be coming to the US anytime soon. Now, that's thanks to supply chain snags, specifically the shortage of passenger seats, and the aircraft is stuck in Europe for now until it has those. Now, American has 50 of the jets on order, but American isn't alone in facing delays because United Airlines has also ordered 50 XLRs back in 2019 to replace the 757-200s, and it's now saying that its first deliveries have been pushed back again with no planes expected in 2025. Initial arrivals are now slated for summer 2026. I think we reported as well that Air Canada aren't expecting their first XLR now until Q1 of 2026, I believe. JetBlue converted 13 of its A321neos to the XLR version, and it was expecting its first aircraft in autumn this year, but even that could be delayed further by what's going on. So, even as Wizz Air recalibrates its ambitions for the A321XLR, it's clear that challenges around this next generation aircraft are part of a much bigger picture.
Hawaiian Airlines changing up the cabins of their Airbus A330s. And this news coming after the airline had their Q2 earnings call. They are in the midst of a huge transformation, as we know, with the being acquired by Alaska Airlines. And now we're learning that the airline is planning on adding premium economy seats to its Airbus A330-200 aircraft. And this is pretty exciting given that the planes, the wide bodies, haven't really had a change up to their cabins in a while. Hawaiian started receiving their A330s in 2010. And of course, that was well before premium economy became very, very popular. That's something that we've reported on quite a bit. And it does kind of it's interesting for me, which I'll mention in a second, but let me just share the news first. This is also interesting because the 787-9 Dreamliners, of course, they don't have premium economy seats on those aircraft either. But I think what we're seeing here is potentially some influence from the executives at Alaska Airlines, but as well as just, again, the rise of premium economy. And these planes are really Hawaiian's workforce across the Pacific and then even international destinations as well. And so back to my thoughts about premium economy. I think that this is great. I know, Tom, we've had this discussion about, in Europe, it seems like there's not really a change to the seats other than they just block off the middle row. But in the US, it's very much like, you look at domestic first class and you see the 2x2 in those big recliner seats. That's pretty much what premium economy is on a wide body aircraft. We have premium, I think it's United Premium Plus, Delta Premium Select, American just has premium economy, which we also just learned that they are going to be returning premium economy to their New York to Los Angeles transcontinental route. But yeah, it's just so widely popular. You've got the bigger seat, you have a little bit more leg room, and airlines have just been, I'm sure that they've been making so much money and revenue from just a premium economy class alone. Personally, I feel like it depends on whether it's worth it. I would almost want to pay for a lie flat seat if I'm going on a really long flight. That's kind of my goal, but I feel like it's definitely attractive to pay maybe just a little bit more than economy and get, leg room and other amenities as well. Like some airlines offer free in-flight beverages, priority boarding, as well as free check bags. So it just depends. We don't really know what premium economy cabin on Hawaiian's Airbus A330s will look like. Also, we don't know how this will change its seating configuration as a whole. So right now, the A330 seats 278 passengers. The main cabin is in a 2-4-2 layout. And also, since we've kind of talked about seatback screens, every seat has a seatback screen on the A330s and the 787s as well. And then in their first class, it's a 2-2-2 layout, and those are lie flat seats. But the first class cabin is relatively small, if you will. But again, that was because, Hawaiian took delivery of these aircraft about 14, 15 years ago, and there hasn't been a big change to the cabin. So I don't think the airline would introduce this if they didn't think it was going to take off. It'll be a benefit to passengers.
Definitely. It's really exciting to see where we're going there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that is going to do it for today's podcast. We will pause next week as Tom and our podcast editor are going to take a well-deserved break, but we'll be back with a fresh new episode the week after. We do hope you enjoyed it, and we welcome any feedback you might have at editorial@simpleflying.com.
For more great content, you can visit our website at simpleflying.com or find us on social media. Simply search for Simple Flying.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a rating on your favorite podcast player. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
In addition to our daily YouTube videos, Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles and a podcast every week. Visit simpleflying.com.